Good morning, everyone. This is Dixie Grunenfelder here at OSPI, and I want to welcome you to this monthly webinar sponsored by OSPI and the Washington Student Achievement Council. This month's topic is centered on dual credit. Right off the bat, I want to say that this presentation PowerPoint will be emailed out to anyone that registered for the webinar today. In addition, the webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on the WSAC Ready Set Grad website soon, in the next week or so. As we go through the presentation today, we encourage you to type in questions and comments in the comment section, and we will be taking a look at those, and we'll pause throughout the presentation to respond to the questions. So, our purpose today is to talk about dual credit, and the ultimate goal for us here is to make sure that every student graduates from high school ready for career, college, and life. And we see dual credit as a critical component to the K-12 education system and creating that foundation. Today in the webinar, we'll be providing some information around data and highlights within that data. We're going to talk about current policy and work that's been going on and recent changes to the dual credit system. And Kim will also be sharing resources, and Stephanie will also be sharing some resources, and we'll be sharing some plans that we have for system development moving forward. So again, my name is Dixie Grunenfelder. On behalf of Superintendent Rakedahl, I want to welcome you to the presentation. I want to encourage you all to check out the OSPI website. Superintendent Rakedahl has come into office and it has a really exciting new administration and a new vision for the work that we're doing, building on what we've been doing. His list of priorities and things that we're working on here are all posted on that website, and we encourage you to visit the OSPI website and take a look at some things going on here. My name is Dixie Grunenfelder, and I'm the Director of Secondary Ed and K-12 Supports, and at this time I'm going to turn it over to Kim and Stephanie.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kim Rakedahl. I am one of two supervisors here at OSPI in the realm of dual credit, as you can see on the webinar page. I specifically supervise Running Start and college and the high school. My colleague Barbara Dietrich, who is not going to be on the webinar this morning but is always here to support you, she takes care of our AP, IB, Cambridge, and Tech Prep aspects of dual credit. And good morning, my name is Stephanie Gardner, and I'm with the Washington Student Achievement Council, and I serve as one of the associate directors. My focus is on dual credit as well as secondary to post-secondary transitions. And I'd like to welcome you this morning, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into the presentation. So the first slide you're seeing, this is actually a document that OSPI will be putting out here shortly that really moves to clarify some of the terminology that is out there in the field. And so at first glance, these headers may seem and or appear similar, but there are some nuances among these categories that we just want to make sure that we make the clarification so that we're all on the same page in terms of what we are referring to, for example, when we say dual credit versus a 2-for-1 course. Beginning with dual credit, you may have heard it also described as concurrent enrollments, accelerated learning, but for our purposes, we are going to refer to it as dual credit or DC. And I'm not going to read through all of the text on here, but just hit some of the key points. And with dual credit specifically, the takeaway here is one, that these are courses that really provide students the potential, I think that's a key word here, to earn high school and college credit at the same time. And with the dual credit options that are available to students, they can take these courses at the high school, the 2-year institution, and or 4-year institution. So multiple ways to access these programs. And I'll talk a little bit more in depth about the options that are available to students in Washington State. So we also have 2-for-1 courses, and these are high school courses that can be counted as 2 high school graduation requirements, even though only 1 credit is earned. And you can see at the bottom of this column, we put in an example. So let's say a student is taking a ceramics course, and they may get 1 credit. And it counts both as a CTE and a fine art high school graduation requirement. The key takeaway here is that the student must choose which credit, the CTE or fine art, that she or he wants to count. And so that's a big distinction that individuals should pay attention to when thinking about 2-for-1 courses and counseling students about options. With CTE equivalency courses, a CTE course that meets academic course requirements, including both state and district graduation requirements. And again, we put in an example of this. So bio through horticulture, students will earn a biology credit and have biology show up on their transcript. The key takeaway here is there are statewide frameworks that have been approved and should be adopted at the district level. And if there are questions about this, the staff here at OSPI are willing to field questions about that. But please note that there are statewide frameworks that guide CTE equivalency courses. And then finally, cross-crediting courses. This is a quote-unquote older or loosely used term for courses that can be cross-credited to meet different graduation requirements. And so again, we've put an example at the bottom. A student at a skills center, DigiPen, counts as a 1 credit in math, 1 credit fine arts, or 1 credit in OC-Ed. And so accounting and or financial literacy or personal finance can count as a CTE or 3rd-year math course. So just a few examples to show and demonstrate what a cross-credited course would look like. So moving on to the types of dual credit that are offered here in Washington State, I think before we jump into the ways students can access dual credit, I think it's important to note that not one size fits all. So there are strengths in all of these programs, and there's also points for consideration when selecting and advising students around what is going to be the best fit for them and their pathway. And then for goals post-high school, what is it they want to do? And so being mindful of that as we're speaking with students and families about the pathways that they would like to pursue in their high school and beyond plan. So first is course completion, and the 2 programs that fall into this are College in the High School and Running Start. Some of the points with both of these programs are consideration for tuition, grade restrictions. So for example, with College in the High School, previously 11th and 12th graders were able to access this program, where now 10th through 12th graders are able to access the program. There are credit restrictions, and so thinking about limits that may be placed on students in terms of the number of credits they are able to pursue. Books and transportation. So this really applies to Running Start. For some students, they may be able to access Running Start, and it affords them the opportunity to take potentially 15 credits. But books and transportation may be a challenge for students, and so really thinking about, would that specific option for a student be a viable one? Moving on to standard exams, we think of AP, so advanced placement, the IB program, and CI program, and I'll show some data a little later on in the presentation about the sheer number of students that are accessing these programs, as well as how many students are taking specific exams in our state. With these programs, points for consideration include fees. There's been a lot of conversation recently around some of the funding for our low-income students going away with the reauthorization of ESSA. And so thinking about
while students may be able to access this, would fees for exams possibly be a barrier? And then what supports can we provide to students? CTCs and four-year universities, the ICWs, Independent Colleges of Washington, and the 6 public baccalaureates have listed policies around these 3 programs. And so, again, when counseling and advising students, being mindful of credit policies may vary somewhat, and so that is something that students, when they're making the decision for which program they would like to access, that they are just mindful that there are policies in place at our institutions in Washington State. And then finally, articulation agreements, and tech prep you'll see is listed here. And the takeaway with this is that there's been a lot of conversation around improving consistency in coding in terms of students, who's benefiting, who's taking these classes for college credit versus high school graduation requirements. And then, you know, really a lot of discussion about, again, the idea of pathway and high school and beyond plan. You know, why would a student access a program such as tech prep? What are their plans post-high school and then into the future? And so it's great that we have a lot of options for students. I think in an advising and counseling capacity, thinking about, you know, again, strengths of the programs as well as points for consideration. So the purpose, what is the purpose of providing students accelerated pathways as high school students? So part of what we've seen from conversations in the field as well as the literature is, one, the opportunity for enrichment, challenge, and rigor, preparation for life beyond high school. 2, earning college credit and getting ahead, so the financial aspect. The takeaway here is that, 1, there's really a diverse rationale for participation, and no matter what the student or family's motivating factor is for participation, again, counselors, family members, it's absolutely key to work with students to make sure, 1, the program is a fit, the maturity level of the student, do students and families have all of the pertinent information to make an informed decision, noting that more isn't always better. And so having those conversations about what is going to serve the purpose of the student, and remembering that once a transcript, a college transcript is established, it does stay with the student for admissions purposes. So here's some of that data that I previously referenced, and this moves from a very granular level to students all the way to district and course averages. So you'll see that about 200,000 students accessed any dual credit program in Washington State, and we've disaggregated by program type. So I'll give you a minute to look at that. Tech prep is the largest at 119,000, or a little over that. Again, there are some coding challenges that we've had in terms of being able to pull that data apart in terms of students who are accessing tech prep for purposes of gaining credit for college versus taking tech prep as a high school graduation requirement. When it comes to districts enrolling students in dual credits, there are 251 of the 295 districts that are eligible. 242, so almost all of the eligible districts that offer 9 through 12 are accessing some type of dual credit program. And we see that Running Start is the most popular at 229. And then finally, we see that in terms of average courses per year, it comes in around 3.5. So moving on to just a snapshot of a 5-year change in dual credit enrollment. Similar to national trends, we have seen an uptick in participation rates in dual credit programs. And so overall, dual credit has expanded by 7%. Beginning in year 2010-11 until 2014-15. So definitely increased excitement, awareness, participation in students accessing these programs. And then finally, wanted to put this slide in here. This really gets to course enrollments, and so I won't touch on all of these. But I think what is exciting and that we potentially, want to see increases in is almost 1,000 students complete an AA by the time they graduate high school. And so we think that's exciting. It speaks and is a testament to the work that you're doing out in the field in terms of supporting students, encouraging them to access these opportunities. And so we're excited about that. So next, we'll move into a little bit of the background and legislation. And what I wanted to highlight here is that the past 25 years, we've seen an expansion, refining of the dual credit landscape in our state, beginning in 1990 with Running Start and the RCW 28A 60390 to the recent passage in 2015 of ESSHB 1546, or excuse me, ESSHB 1546, which specifically addresses dual credit in college and the high school specifically. So here's a few highlights around 1546, which is the primary focus, I would say, of this conversation. Some of the points here were with 1546 is that there was an expansion of existing grants to assist Running Start students with transportation and books, eligibility of 10th grade students, and provide some new funding for college and the high school program tuition. With the passage of 1546, though, there are two requirements. One of these is the development of a college and a high school quality and eligibility standards, associated WSACs. Those are currently under revision. And then the second is that there's a required report to the legislator with recommendations for further improvement. And OSPI is leading the work group that is assigned to looking at college and the high school, the evaluation process that we'll talk about, and the report. So I'm going to actually, yes. So with 1546, part of what was mandated was creating a work group, and with that was the mandate that there would be an evaluation of existing college and the high school programs within Washington State, and that is a new process that will begin on July 1st. The only institutions / programs that are exempt are those that are NACEP accredited, and we have two in the state, the University of Washington and Everett's Community College. August 15th, all districts will receive notification of meeting standard after going through an evaluation process. Part of that will be submitting evidence of meeting standards. We put in a link on this slide around the NACEP standards. So if you're interested in finding out more about what those specific standards are, you can access the link, and that information is there. So how does this pertain to you as a counselor? At most, you may be asked as a counselor to provide course descriptions and evidence related to registering college and the high school courses. So this one I'm actually going to just skip through because we've covered that on some previous slides.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little bit more information on some of the details around some of the changes that have been occurring in dual credit. And so this is also out of House Bill 1546. For some of you, it may have impacted you in that the Running Start in the high school through Central and Eastern was ended, and those colleges had to start operating under the college and the high school format. So there was some funding that was approved, and we've heard from the field, and we're all very aware on this end of things that it was certainly not enough to cover even all of our low-income students to receive one class, much less more than that. But it is a step in the right direction, and we are using the data that we have and many different voices up here at the state level, and along with yours coming from the buildings, to continue advocating for the complete funding of this system. But this is in the slide on the right for 2016-17. This is what was distributed, or that was ready to be distributed to schools for the college and the high school subsidies this year to cover low-income students. So those of you from rural schools, from small schools, 20 miles or more away from a participating college, you've got your funding for any of your low-income students to take up to 10 credits. Then we were able to get through half of the schools who have low-income populations with college and the high school in their schools to give them funding for a 5-credit class for their low-income students, so they could at least access one this year and have that be funded. So we continue to need your support and collaboration in working towards improving these funding outcomes, because we're very aware it's not enough yet, but it's a start. So then we've been fielding a lot of questions at our agency, at the State Board for Community Technical Colleges, at the Student Achievement Council about the co-delivery of AP and or IB with college and the high school. And these were new guidance rules that were developed last spring that were disseminated through the community college system and to your districts. And so given the high volume of questions we've been having around this, we wanted to clarify a few things in case you haven't heard this yet. So these are, I must say, from the get-go guidelines. It's linked there, but this is not in any way considered best practice. This was set up as a way to provide flexibility, in particular for smaller schools who struggle to fill a class of enough students who want to take that additional rigor and enrichment. And so a co-delivery means essentially you have a college and the high school course, you have an interlocal agreement that has been set up with that college, you're following that policy and that procedure so that you are mirroring that college class, but you've also taken your AP syllabus and you've aligned it with that college and the high school course. The AP syllabi have a little more flexibility to them, and obviously the student will have to still take the exam and pass it in order to have the potential for college credit. But the real kind of challenge for us in the counseling realm is, as you well know, when you have two different sets of students sitting in the same course at the same time every day, eventually you've got to get to the point where you are separating them out in your system. So your registrar, or if it's you, by the time you post a final grade, you need a class list for the college and the high school students who've paid for the credit, and you need a class list for those students who are getting the AP designation. The college and the high school kids get the college course title and the C designator on their transcript. The students who are doing the AP class get the AP designation and an A on their transcript. They cannot get both. I want to make sure that's really clear. They've got to choose, and those kids who are choosing the college and the high school, as you well know, should already be enrolled with the college system, and you should have a record of that so you know who to separate out by the end of your term. So if there's specific questions on that, please send them in. We'll be happy to answer them, but this has caused a lot of confusion, so we're trying to clarify. And then, of course, just remember that it is the high school's responsibility to confirm with your partner college or colleges who actually enrolled with the college so that you know who to give that C designator and that college course title to. And then with IB, I wanted to make just a really important distinction for those of you who are at IB schools. And this applies specifically to your kids who are pursuing an IB diploma. As you well know, they have 6 classes that are required, and they have to say IB on their transcript for that class description title in order to be eligible for that IB diploma. So if you have an IB and a college and the high school co-delivery, your kids who are just taking some IB or higher level classes, they're welcome to call it college and the high school and pay for the credit, and you can change that designation by the time you get to your grade reporting. But for your IB diploma candidates, they need guidance and support in understanding that they should not be signing up for college in the high school. They should not be paying for that credit, because then they will lose the IB designation on their transcript and on that course title, and they won't be an IB diploma candidate any longer. So I hope that that's clear, but again, we will field specific questions. If any of you have them, please type those in, because this has been a little confusing for folks. And then again, I've referenced the guidelines on this slide as well. Both times it's a live link, so when you get your hands on this, please go check that out and send us questions if you have them. So related to the transcripting, this again is sort of our plea for help with you, because our data on this end comes from your data. And so working with your registrars to really make sure that all your courses are clearly marked in your course catalog, if they're going to count as advanced placement, if they're a cater for college, for your college admissions, that needs to be very clear. If it's a college in the high school, it should say MAT 141, and that would be your title along with the C designator. Obviously, you can figure out what your honors classes are, your IB, the few schools that have Cambridge. So we really need your help in making sure, in particular, that the T for Tech Prep is actually only on classes that still have an articulation agreement in place with the college that that teacher has got a relationship with. So for example, at my most recent high school, we have an accounting teacher who still has an agreement with South Puget Sound Community College that accounting class, if the students want to sign up for Tech Prep, they can get that credit at SPSCC, and it's still in place. However, we've heard from numerous folks out in the field that, oh my gosh, well, we have all these CTE courses and they're just all marked Tech Prep because we used to have Tech Prep. Well, that Perkins funding from the federal government went away in 2011. And when that occurred, many of our colleges lost their staffing for the Tech Prep program. So they, from their end, may not have had anybody fielding those requests for Tech Prep. But what happens when you keep that T designation on your transcript is what we pull out of the CEDAR system. So when you saw those data points about dual credit enrollments in the state of Washington, and it looks like Tech Prep is the biggest by far, that is not the reality. So we're going through multiple channels asking for your administrators, your superintendents, your CTE directors, and you to work with the registrars to help get that cleaned up for us so we can be better advocates for this system and for the resources that you guys need to help kids. Another hot topic that is happening this year that Stephanie alluded to already is we have a new federal funding law called the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. You probably have had it. It's replacing the No Child Left Behind. And the rules and the implementation of that are still being looked at and finalized. And this school year, we have a gap between the old No Child Left Behind and the new ESSA. And what that has meant for federal funding is the money that we normally get for test fee waivers for low-income students to take AP and or get their IB registrations covered. That money is not coming. We have a very limited pot of money that we have at the state that is going to go to IB programs, but all of our funding that we get for AP test fee waivers is not in place for this year. As you can see in the box, there are some efforts that are occurring right as we speak on the lawmaker end of things to try to get some state funding, or I hear there's even some private funding being solicited to get out to you for this school year. But as you well know, we may not know by the time your kids are registering for your exams whether or not that is going to come. So we encourage you to really look at other resources within your district, local businesses, your PTAs, PTOs, your education foundations, Rotaries, Kiwanis, all those kinds of options to see if you can get some help until we know whether or not we'll be able to send any funding your way this summer when you submit your invoices for your testing. So with that, we're going to dive into some different things to be thinking about, stuff that is coming up next, sort of a here's things to be aware of that are on the horizon and or happening right now. So as Stephanie mentioned, we do have a state-level dual credit work group that is staffed by OSPI Student Achievement Council, the State Board for Community Technical Colleges, the Council of Presidents, which represents our four-year baccalaureates, the Association of Washington School Principals, the Independent Colleges of Washington, which are our four-year privates, and the Attorney General's Office to help us make sure we're staying within our laws. And we are meeting voluntarily around the dual credit system because it, as Stephanie mentioned, has continued to grow. And I'm really excited to be here in this role. I saw a few names I recognized on the list of participants, but as a 17-year school counselor, I've worked with this system alongside you all from the practitioner end, and OSPI has developed some additional resources to try to provide some additional oversight at the state end. So you can see some of the things that we are working on in partnership with all of the other agencies that play in the sandbox with us on dual credit. We're meeting regularly, trying to look especially at our communication, ensuring that all of us are speaking the same language to you and that there isn't confusion from one sector to the next of what's going on in our system. Obviously, we're here to provide technical support, and Stephanie and I, and Ruben Flores, who is the new dual credit supervisor for the State Board for Community Technical Colleges. We're all new in our roles, but we have a lot of experience here, and we're here to help you when you have those questions. Please do send them in. We are looking at policy and trying to provide enough information to inform decision makers, and then looking at rules and WSAC changes and things related to the entire system with a strategic plan in mind, looking at some short-term and long-term goals around equity and funding to improve the entire system for you as practitioners and also for those of us on this end who support you. So some of the things that have occurred recently in the dual credit realm, and some of it through this work group, but most of it through other folks who've been working in this realm prior to the work group being put back in place after a 2-year hiatus. We do have some standards now in place for college and high school, and I'll mention those briefly in a little bit. We have a WSAC around the implementation of college and the high school, and that again is where we're trying to get out the information around co-delivery and some of those other pieces that are still causing a little confusion. But if you need some direct assistance, don't hesitate to ask. And we will be implementing our first ever review process, which we'll talk about in more detail in a minute. For AP and IB, the community and technical colleges and the public baccalaureates tried to develop some consistency in their policies around the awarding of dual credit. And I wanted to make sure that you all are aware of the dual credit lookup tool on the Washington Student Achievement Council's website and on OSPI's dual credit website. It's on their Ready, Set, Grad system, and that allows you to help kids see in a side-by-side, I've got 3 schools in Washington I'm interested in, I've taken these AP or IB tests, these are my scores. It will show them very directly, very clearly what they will get when they get to those colleges for their test scores, whether it be credit or advanced placement. The Student Achievement Council also has a really comprehensive chart that's incredibly detailed with information about all the different dual credit resources, what are some of the implications around cost and potential results for kids that I would encourage you to also seek out on their website and to utilize that with your students. We are in the process of finalizing an update for this year, so that should be posted shortly as well. And then very exciting, one of the superintendent's priorities is career and tech ed. So getting a definition of career and tech ed included within college and high school, so our more career and tech-minded students can be also accessing those college courses in realms that they're interested in. And of course, those CTE equivalencies, not dual credit, but helping them to reach those goals and maybe prepare them in their high schools for taking that leap into dual credit and having the skills to be successful in those areas. And of course, I want to bring this back to something that we all are very aware of coming, and for probably the great majority of you is in your lap right now, and that's the 24-credit diploma and the need for our sophomores, the class of 2019. Unless you have the waiver, they're our first kiddos running through this gauntlet. So this is our visual of what that looks like. And it's a misnomer to call it Core 24, because really it's Core 17, guys. We have 17 core credits that have to be passed in some capacity in order for a student to graduate. Then they have their 4 electives. And of course, with the new 2 credits of world language and additional 2nd credit of art, those are the 3 credits that are flexible. And if a student's high school and beyond plan clearly articulates that they are headed in a direction that would be better served by maybe a skill centers class or another area within your class offerings that would better prepare them for their pathway leading out of high school, that's where you can have a waiver of either the world language or that 2nd credit of art. Really, really key to be making sure with your administration that you've got a school board policy and process in place for what that's going to look like, that you're really clear in how you have documented that student's high school and beyond plan so that there's something to refer to if and when that student comes to you during registration this spring as a sophomore and says, I know I haven't taken a world language yet, but I would rather do this skills center course next year because this is what I want to be when I grow up. And that gives you that leeway to say that's definitely a personalized pathway that would necessitate that instead of your language, and so you've got your waiver process in place. This is also a piece that's really generating some confusion, so trying to provide clarity. Please make sure you're not looking at that personalized pathway as a career cluster or a career path to a specific career. It's really about their high school and beyond plan. And we do have on the Career Guidance Washington on OSPI's website a series of 6 questions that go along really nicely with the personalized pathway to help your students really be clarifying in their own mind and thinking about what is it that I want to do with my second half of high school to prepare me for my post-high school plan. And then these are some best practices for that high school and beyond plan. As many of you probably know, this varies across the state as to what a high school and beyond plan actually looks like, both physically and in theory. And so we've got some best practices that are on the State Board of Ed's website around the elements that should be in place for a personalized pathway and for a high school and beyond plan. Please keep in mind, this is just sort of an idea of a minimum. You know, at a bare minimum, we should have those post-high school goals, have some sort of career interest inventory done so kids can see what's out there related to their interests and skills and their goals and dreams. What does their 4-year class planning look like? I know we get bogged down with a lot of other things, but this is going to become increasingly critical for us to be really helping students see that 4-year plan of how they're building on their coursework going through high school, and then what assessments are needed both for graduation and that post-secondary, whether it be to access Running Start, so I need to take it sophomore year, or I want to do a placement test later on to be ready for my 2 or 4-year college track. And then again, as a best practice, we would highly encourage that you are doing some vertical alignment with your middle schools. If you aren't already, there's recommendations that this high school and beyond plan start with a middle school and beyond plan. And by 8th grade, if not sooner, ideally in elementary school. And again, helping those kids understand earlier on with your elementary counselors kind of what are some things that are out there, what's developmentally appropriate for them at that age to be looking at. But by 8th grade, okay, how do I walk into my high school, step off that bus on the right track with a 4-year plan already in mind, but knowing full well that it's revisited annually and can be adjusted. And of course, as we all know, those elementary parents are super engaged at that age, but by the time we get our kiddos in high school, many of those parents haven't connected with the school in years. We're really hoping you're looking at some ways to reel them back in. If it isn't a student-led conference that they're attending, something to get them reconnected so that they are partners with you in this great work. And then I wanted to let you know about some really amazing things that we're doing here at OSPI with data. I know for some of you that's a 4-letter word, and I totally get it. And you're going, I don't have time for this. but I hope you'll make time and encourage especially your administrators to make time, because these data analytics, we've got a ton of them here at OSPI, including attendance and discipline and graduation rates and some really social emotional related factors, as well as career and college readiness and academic. It all fits in our realm, and that data gets released to your district. We do have our first dual credit data release coming up in March. It's going to be pretty basic to begin with, because most of our data right now is around enrollments and some completion data, but it's a good place to start in looking at how are we serving our students. The district will provide is only at, or the data, excuse me, that we'll provide is only at a district level, but then you can take that as a template to go back to your schools and really dive into your own student information systems and start pulling your data, if you're not already, around dual credit. I know a lot of us do it for our care teams and our multidisciplinary teams, and we're looking at some things, but this is around dual credit, all of it being shot through that equity lens, really addressing the disproportionality that we see in all of our system, whether it be by race, socioeconomics, or other identifiers. You'll get your hands on that, or your administrators will. Really encourage them to collaborate with you so you can start putting together some systemic interventions. And again, this goes back to our data is only as good as your data, so we really need your help with that cleanup. And I've linked to the page here that will take you to all our data analytics if you want to look at some of those other ones that are already out. Oh, and 9th grade failures is coming very soon too, and that's a critical piece as well. I thought I'd throw that out. And I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie. She's got a few more things to cover with you before we do Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Kim. So, yes, data. Data is our friend. Data is great. And part of what is exciting here is that, you know, as we think about data, you know, and those big questions of, you know, what data do we have? What data don't we have? I think the more that we're able to dig down into data, it provides a fuller and richer picture of what is actually happening from a state level down into the building level. And so we're really excited. I know we're doing a lot around this as our dual credit work group. It's something that we want to take on to think more about in terms of, you know, what are the data that we have, but also what are the data that we potentially need to collect as well as analyze. And one of the questions that we think about immediately is we have information now about who is accessing dual credit programs, but the next question really becomes the outcomes. And so how are students performing as a result of participating in these courses? And so there's more to come on this, but I think with OSPI's work and the work across multiple agencies to drill down into data and then make that accessible, it really helps all of us, no matter where you're sitting or the lens that you're looking through the work, to assist our students and residents in our state. And so this slide in front of you is just a snapshot of students of color and any of the dual credit programs. The two top bars are the ones you want to pay attention to. So it shows all 9th through 12th graders in 2015, the overall population. And then the second bar is any dual credit access. And you can see there's actual similarity in proportion, which is great, but then as you go into the programs, you see that those numbers don't necessarily, or I should say they're not necessarily in proportion. And so digging into that as to maybe why that's the case. And then the second slide, focusing on free and reduced price lunch, students who participated in dual credit. The yellow bar is all students at 37%. You'll see Cambridge has the highest at 49, but again, need to mention that the ends, so the sheer numbers are different. It's not the same number across each of these groups that are participating. And this data can be found on the WSAC website under wasac.wa.gov under policy, and then college credit in the high school report. And I do need to acknowledge Noreen Light, who did the heavy lifting on this report of pulling this all together. She did an amazing job, and really looking forward to building on this report in years to come. And so this slide here is some of the things that we're thinking about as a dual credit work group, issues that are really salient for us in the coming months and years ahead, to think about equitable access and dual credit in Washington State. Part of it is funding, and so expansion of funding so that all students should be able to participate, and that economics should not be a barrier to participating and accessing these programs, whether you're in a rural district, an inner city, a foster student. No student should be prohibited from participating in a program because of a financial decision. Credits, and so just thinking about again which program students are accessing, what is the appropriate choice for a student, balancing kind of life academic balance, and so taking these rigorous courses have an additional demand on students, and so thinking about that and as part of the decision making when students are considering entering into these rigorous programs, and the potential effects of taking a college course in high school. And so, what does that mean in terms of my ability to access college credit, but then, depending on how I do in those courses, how I fare, the impact that it potentially has as I may move into post-secondary education. Communication, Kim mentioned, this is a big one for our work group, and so as we have new developments in the dual credit world, it's really important that we are efficiently and effectively communicating with you and multiple stakeholders across the state in terms of policy changes, funding, etc., so that we're really all on the same page and can best advise students and families as they're making decisions, and then support you in your work. And then we talked about outcome data. We're only as good as the data that's put into the system is the first point. And then second point is really drilling down into data to tell a more, a fuller, richer story about what is happening in Washington State relative to diverse populations, who's accessing, and then more importantly, what is the outcomes for students who are participating in these programs. And then this is our last slide. So thinking about dual credit from a state perspective, a systems perspective, and then down into the school building. I won't go through all of these. We put them up there. You can take a glance at them. But know that with each of these realms, there are considerations that we are very mindful of, and we have heard loud and clear from stakeholders across our state about the strengths as well as some of the challenges that are out there. I think this is an iterative process, and so we may have one version of a program, and as we get that feedback and we have feedback loops in the system, it forces us to really go back and think about where are areas that we may need to reconsider, make changes, so that our system, from a very broad perspective down to a school building, are really running on all cylinders and they're efficient and effective, but more importantly, that our students are getting the quality information, guidance that they need to be successful in whatever pathway they decide. And then we wanted to put up contact information from some of the members of the dual credit work group. And as Kim mentioned, this is a collaborative initiative among multiple agencies and organizations. And so you'll see me and Kim's information, but also Julie Garver, who's at College of Presidents, as well as Joyce Hammer at the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges, as well as Barb Beatrice at OSPI.
Okay, so that wraps up essentially what we are here to chat with you about. We have about 10 minutes left, and aside from one specific question that I will get back to that particular person on because it's very specific to their school, if there are any general questions or things that are still unclear for you or that you need some help with, we've got about 10 minutes, so please feel free to send those in If you are not thinking you have anything now, but something pops up later when you go back and revisit this PowerPoint, or when you link to some of the resources we've connected you with and questions come up, I also would encourage you to really look at the contact information on this slide for those of us who are here to support you. We want to make sure that we are helping you do the very best you can for your kids in this realm, as it is certainly a big part of our high school life in particular.
Okay, we have a question, Kim and Stephanie, and I'll read it verbatim. I realize it might be a local decision, but is there anything OSPI can do about community colleges requiring college and the high school math teachers needing a master's in math content area? It is preventing a lot of potential opportunities for students.
Thanks. Kim said she's going to let me do this. So as Kim mentioned, we're fairly new to our positions, and so I can only speak to what I've experienced and heard over the past couple months I've been with WSAC. We recognize this is a potential challenge. It has come up multiple times, both at the national level. So going to the NASIP National Conference, this was brought up. It's been emailed as a challenge from multiple folks across the state, and so I don't know at this point that we have an answer. It is on the radar. I know in April we will be convening for a regional conference, NASIP conference in Montana, and I know that this is a question we really want to put forth to leadership around how are other states grappling with this challenge, especially in Washington with already having a teacher shortage. This complicates things even more, and so we have definitely heard you. It is the question that we want to pose to the executive director and leadership at NASIP when we convene in April in Montana.
Any more?
Nope.
Still have a few minutes if there's anything else that's percolating in your brain and rising to the top. While we wait and give you guys a few minutes, I would just encourage you once again to really take a look at the Washington Student Achievements website. The council has some amazing resources there for you if you're not aware around graduation requirements and dual credit. The State Board of Ed still has a really excellent resource on their website that has a row of tabs for class, graduating class, and kind of what are the grad recs for each class, because as I remember quite well, that's a moving target. Depending on what grade level you're in, you've got lots of different pieces to keep track of. The dual credit website is also being revamped at OSPI as we continue to try to respond to your needs. Another question, another couple, here we go.
When you say CTE will be rolled into college and the high school, does that mean CTE students will need to pay tuition for these courses? And does it mean that CTE courses that are on the transfer list to the university can now be more considered for college credit?
So I will attempt to do my best with that question. We've had some questions popping up on the dual credit listserv, which serves our college partners as well as our high school partners around tech prep versus college and the high school. And there have always been the option through the college and the high school program, if the articulation agreement is put in place, it can count towards any graduation requirement. It can be any kind of class, as long as the high school district and the college put in place all of those interlocal agreements. So that's a matter of expansion of a system that is growing, but still, obviously, as was mentioned in our previous question, has some barriers with teachers needing to be trained and be able to have that relationship with their college partners so that they're offering essentially the exact same class that's in the college at that high school. With CTE, as you well know, many of those programs require resources, whether it be an auto shop or I need welding equipment, that are prohibitive for high schools, because that's why a lot of our students end up going to skills centers or local colleges to begin with, is our high schools don't always have those resources. So in the CTE realm, there's no policy barrier to offering a CTE course through college and the high school. It's more a matter of some of those other resource barriers that are already in place.
Okay, I'm going to ask a 2-for-1 question. There's 2 of them.
Okay.
I was under the impression that 2-for-1 option could count as meeting grad requirements for both options, i.e. art and CTE, but that a student can only be awarded a credit for one requirement. Did I hear you correctly when you said a student must pick only one? Can you clarify? Second question, can one class meet 2 requirements? Ag science students can only get science and occ-ed credit with this one class. Can they get 1 credit for that class?
Yeah, so I think that's essentially what Stephanie was saying in going over the slide that we've created. The kids do need to pick which credit they want to get. So in our system at my most recent high school, our stuff immediately defaulted to CTE. But for example, with the ceramics, we had a CTE certified teacher who was teaching that ceramics class, so kids had the option to get the 2-for-1. They had to let our registrar know if they wanted the fine art credit because it automatically defaulted to the CTE. So if the student wants a different credit than what the default is in your system, you need a process for letting them know that either through you or directly, because they can count them both for graduation requirements, but they still only get the 1 credit, and that's where that choice comes in. And it can be ag and CTE as well. If you've got a CTE equivalency course in place and you've adopted the state frameworks, the student can get the occ-ed and the science in that situation for graduation, but still needs to make that decision about, are they counting it as a CTE course or are they counting it as a science? With those CTE equivalency courses, the great majority of those were set up for our less traditional learners who want those other opportunities to meet a science or to meet a math than, you know, our Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Algebra Beyond, etc., or our, you know, physics and biology and chemistry. So those are how those are working to meet the needs of individual learners so they can still have those grad recs count, but be meeting those standards in a different way. And that's why that framework adoption is really key, so that those kids, as long as we still have our standardized test linked to graduation, we want to make sure we're preparing all those kids to pass those exams as long as they need to. So that's why those framework standards are really key in those other courses, so that the kids are still meeting standard on those exams. And that's all the questions we have so far. Again, really want to thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is always a busy day to listen in, and know that we will send you the PowerPoint once we get our list of registrants, and then all of this will be posted. And
no, just thank you for being in the conversation, for the work you do on behalf of our students. And if, again, there's anything that we can do to make your work easier, please let us know. We're happy to field your questions. So thank you.
All right. Have a great day, y'all. Enjoy the end of the semester. Bye.